All right.
All right, I'd like to call the June meeting of the Ulster County Planning Board together, and we'll start with the roll call. Dennis, please.
Good, Chair. Ms. Pecora,
Here.
Mr. Gade. Sorry, Glenn, Mr. Gadali, I apologize.
I'm here.
Mr. Cohen,
Here.
Mr. Conyer is excused. I'm sorry. Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Mr. Hanson is excused. Mr. Brandt or Miss Lanzetta? Miss Gatto. Mr. Bogus.
Here.
Mr. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Baden.
He's in
He's here.
attendees,
Just showed up.
or he just showed up. Okay.
Okay. I see him down there. Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Havarti is excused. Miss Welton.
Here.
Mr. Watkins.
Here.
Mr. Almquist is excused. Mr. Markowitz. Mr. Rudikoff.
Markowitz is here. Victor's here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We got you now, Victor. Thank you. Mr. Rudikoff. Mr. Travers.
Here.
Mr. Murray. Mr. McLaughlin.
Vince is here.
Vince.
Yep.
He's muted.
Okay.
I'm here.
Thank you, Vince. Mr. Gagliardi.
Present.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm here too. I'm sorry, I didn't unmute in time.
Thanks, Amanda.
everyone had a chance to read the minutes from the May meeting?
I'll make a motion to accept them.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second. Drew.
Okay, so Vince and Drew. Anybody opposed, recused? They're accepted. Okay, any educational and training opportunities?
I have nothing. If any of the board members have any, there's a lot of webinars out there. It's hard to keep track of them. There's one coming up, I know, with respect to water quality coordinating committees. We just went through one today from NYSERDA on the changes to state law relative to large scale solar. And they went over some of the model zoning statutes that are available to municipalities with respect to solar site development, as well as battery development, et cetera. So there's a lot of model laws out there now with respect to solar, both from the industry as well as from the agency, NYSERDA. I don't have any specific dates for you.
So that was with NYSERDA?
Yeah. I think Mary Ann's been sending out the webinars. If she hasn't, it's because I've neglected to send them to her. But I usually send the webinars to Mary Ann. She gets them out to the board.
Thank you. Any community reports?
Jerry, this is Drew. I have one. As I think most of you know, that the board has started moving forward with a sewer district in the Shokan area, and the design has been kind of held up until we got a location for the sewer plant itself. So since our last meeting, the town board meeting in May, we authorized the supervisor to sign a contract on the purchase of that piece of property where the sewer plant would be located. So that means the design can start moving forward now with that location settled.
Okay.
We're probably looking at least a couple of 3 years before this thing really starts taking off.
Drew, do you have that location?
I don't. Yeah, I can tell you where it is. I don't have the actual SBL number on me. If you were looking at the Arbor Art location in Shokan,
Mhm.
the property is just east of that location. Just east of that is looks like a small lot with an abandoned house on it, and then there's a 6-acre lot. I think it's actually 6.3 acres just east of that. It also borders on the Grant Avery Park that the town owns. And the Butternut Creek runs right through that property, so it makes an excellent location for sewer treatment. And
Anyone else?
if this sewer treatment plant goes forward as planned, it would be the largest plant in the Catskill area.
Anyone else have anything to offer?
Yeah, the new owner, Vince here, the new owners of the former Dragon Inn site in Saugerties have really started to clean up the site. It's very welcome because it's been an eyesore for quite some time. So they're really starting to clean it up and get stuff out of there. So it's a real blessing for certainly for the village.
Great. Okay. I don't have any additional reports, and I don't believe there's any committee reports either. Dennis, you want to talk about the planning department reports?
Sure,
Finance
thanks.
report?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things from a financial perspective. The department is in good shape relative to its budget. We continue to advance a couple of projects on the transportation side, and overall the county's budget is in good shape as well. We are starting the budget process for the new year for 2022. We start that budget process generally in June, and we're generally through most of the budget process by the end of August into September. We're also starting the capital program project process as well. So it should be an interesting year with respect to budgets, because the county, with respect to the federal money that's coming in, is in fairly decent financial shape as compared in years past, and particularly in 2020 when we instituted literally bare bones budgeting. So we would anticipate that this budget year will be a little bit easier relative to some of the operating funds, and certainly easier with respect to some of the capital program that the county needs to accomplish. On the environmental notice bulletins, I have nothing to add to those environmental notice bulletins. On communications, the only thing I would tell you with respect to communications is there's one communication from the Town of Lloyd Planning Board, and that has to do with the lead agency with respect to Falcon Ridge subdivision. You should have, your municipality should have received a request from the Ulster County Transportation Council to identify the 5 top infrastructure needs in your community. That has to do with the monies that the county is receiving from the American Recovery Act, and how that money could be allocated to help municipalities achieve some of their infrastructure needs and economic development goals. That study is due back, I believe, next week. We have received answers from Woodstock and from Shongum and from the town of Ulster. We look forward, if you haven't seen, if your community is not involved, or you have a conversation with your supervisor, and please ask them to respond. The county executive is also doing listening with respect to the infrastructure needs as well. So they're actually down in Shongum tonight at a meeting down in Shongum talking about those needs. And I would simply say that these kinds of listening sessions make some of the priorities at a local level become much more real, and it forces a certain amount of discipline in terms of budgets and what you ask for. The survey asks for your top 5, and it doesn't just pertain to transportation. It asks for water, sewer, or transportation projects.
That's good.
So I'm sorry, Dennis, what was the name of
It's the American Recovery Act. The county got a $17 million this year under the American Recovery Act, and it's going to get another $17 million next year, 2 tranches. And the county formed a committee with the legislature and the executive to essentially have a discussion about how that money should be spent. And it's based on, the reason for the money is to talk about how you can help the county bounce back from the impacts of COVID. And some of that bounce back may have to do with infrastructure needs that you couldn't do because you didn't have enough money to do them during the COVID pandemic. And some of them may have to do with economic development projects, helping out small businesses, Main Street, et cetera. The council was asked to essentially help sort of corral the infrastructure needs with the at the municipal level. The county executive has identified some needs at the county level, particularly with respect to mental health, and also particularly with respect to housing.
Okay, and this isn't the one we talked about last month where it could be a nonprofit. The one last month we talked about, like, it couldn't be the municipality itself. It had to be either nonprofits or small businesses or something like that.
There was a grant application. I don't recall it directly, Amanda, but there was a grant application where the nonprofit couldn't. There's also a community development block grant program out there right now. I mean, maybe that's what you're referring to. In that case, the municipality has to apply, but and the nonprofits and the private sector cannot. And that is, again, a recovery. That's a recovery, and counties are eligible for up to $1 million, and municipalities are eligible, unless it's a joint application, are eligible for up to $500,000.
It was the CDBG money.
I thought it was. Yeah. Thanks, Vince.
Okay, great.
And I know some communities are applying. I know that is the case. Some communities are applying, but if you haven't applied, New Paltz generally applies for, under the normal funding rounds, they generally apply for sewer money. But they are eligible to apply for housing funds or other types of recovery funds. But the key here is you have to implement the project within 12 months.
Okay. And it's under the American Recovery Act. If I go look under that, I'll find everything.
Nope, that's under the Housing and Community Renewal, New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal. And it's called Community Development Block Grant Funds.
Okay.
And it's called, it's actually what they call DRI money. It's disaster recovery money under that. I think there's like 66 million available statewide for non-entitlement communities, as I recall.
Okay, yeah. There's so many, I'm getting confused. All right.
You know, so are we.
This is Mitchell Scott. Just a quick question for you. The 2022 budget request, so that the $17 million that's being allocated to, I guess, Ulster County next year.
Exactly.
Is there an email that was sent out to the county supervisors?
My understanding is that the county has essentially made the municipalities aware of this funding, and they're going out to the various locations now on a listening tour. So that the answer, I haven't seen the email, so I can't answer for sure. But my understanding is that the municipalities are aware that the county has this money coming. I should also indicate that the money was also allocated to all the municipalities based on population. So there is, each municipality has its own ARA money that it's also getting. In the case of the city of Kingston, there's a list on the website if you want to look at it. In the case of the city of Kingston, it's about 17 million total. In the case of Ulster County, it's about 34 million. I think Saugerties got about 3 or 4 million. So that each municipality had its own allocation.
So it's on the Ulster County website?
Now, you'd have to go to the American Recovery Act
Okay.
website, and the easiest way to do it is through the congressional offices. If you go on Delgado's website or you go on Schumer's website, you can pick up the allocations broken down by municipality.
I'll try
Okay,
to
great.
grab a link now and send it out to everybody in the chat.
Yay.
Yeah, Dennis, Senator Gillibrand's office, sorry, Mike Baden, I just joined in, coming from another meeting. Senator Gillibrand's office has been really good about sending out a lot of emails to town supervisors and answering our questions and keeping us informed of the status of things. And Congressman Delgado has been good as well. Basically, all three of them are really Senator Schumer and Gillibrand and Congressman Delgado are really trying to get as much information out to us as possible. And the Association of Towns has been doing a lot of webinars on, their attorney has been doing webinars on what the law says and more importantly, what it doesn't say. And so for most of the municipalities, other than the city of Kingston, we're still waiting on the state to tell us about the money and when we're going to get it and really what the rules are. And the city gets it directly from the federal government and the county does, but the municipalities get it from the state.
Yep.
So we're still in a waiting process.
Yeah, and we have not seen a great deal of guidance. I just want to say we have not seen a great deal of guidance either at the county level. The guidance seems to be if it's almost like there's things that you can't spend it on rather than there's things that you can spend it on. And the can't list is, or the do not list is relatively small. There's also some strategic things to think about here because there is a significant amount of money that's allocated to particular areas of concern. There's a restaurant fund, for example. There's a broadband fund, for example. So those monies are separate and distinct from the monies that the communities are getting or that the county is getting. So investments in those types of things you would suggest that there are other monies coming from other sources to handle those types of needs.
Any special topics discussion?
No.
Can I just ask, I'm sorry, but when you say there's a restaurant fund, so do you mean individual restaurants? There's something that they can go do? Okay.
At the federal level, there's money specifically devoted to broadband, as I recall, restaurant recovery. I don't remember all of them, but there are specific buckets of funding that are available. And those are some of the buckets that are available.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but those applications are directly direct to the federal government.
That's correct. Yep.
It's not through the municipality or through the state. It's just a program that somebody who can, meets the requirements can apply for.
You know, New Paltz has a lot of restaurants, but they're all little guys and they don't have a lot of, they don't have a lot of bandwidth themselves for dealing with things like this. They don't have staff and stuff, so.
Right. Probably they should reach out to the congressman or the senator, and I'm sure their offices could help guide them through the process.
So, I mean, I would only say that the idea of money that is a grant and does not require to be paid back is highly motivating with respect to small businesses.
Very true. Unfortunately, we've lost our Chamber of Commerce director, and so we don't have just a central place to contact everybody. But
so, Dennis, I'm assuming we might be going back to meeting in person next month.
I won't make any assumptions until we see whether the governor extends the executive order, Vince. But if we do, we'll let the board know as soon as possible.
Current expires June 16. So.
Okay. Now is the time for public comment. Is there anyone in the general public?
if I could just say one more thing, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The other grant opening that's out there, if you're not aware of it, and this is available for businesses as well as municipalities, is the state has issued its notice of funding availability for what they call the consolidated funding application. Those are the ones that are controlled by the regional economic development councils. But that funding NOFA is out as well. And that is a typical economic development funding, but there is some housing money in there as well.
Okay,
Also, as far as the remote meetings, I'm pretty sure I read that there's going to be legislation introduced.
Yep.
To not to make them permanent, but to make them a permanent option.
right. Okay. Now I'll ask again. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that.
Sorry, Jim.
Is there any public comment at this time?
Right. Just raise your hand and I can recognize you to speak. And anyone? We have a lot of people out there.
Rob, we might want to explain to people that this is, if they want to talk about a specific application, this is their time. So,
Yeah, this is the only time you get to speak on it. So
Yes.
speak now, forever hold your peace. There we go. All right, Mr. Goldman.
Hi, I just want to
Ms.
make
Gold.
sure that I understand. When you say talk about a specific application, do you mean that's pending before the board tonight?
Correct.
Ah, okay, I wasn't sure that's. So I do want to talk about the Solar Mill Farm application. Is this the appropriate time to do that?
Yes, it is.
Ah, wonderful. Glad I'm on. As you probably know from the materials that you've received, we are a pretty tight-knit rural community here in the Solar Mill area, in the Olive area. And there are approximately 150 families that have banded together since last summer to oppose the Solar Mill Farm development, which would involve 13 homes in a very kind of narrow piano key plan design right on the road in an area where the roads are extremely narrow and it's even hard to get two cars to pass safely. So we have come together for a number of reasons to try to get a positive declaration on SECRA, to get the developer to do a more in-depth environmental impact study, particularly around congestion for traffic, which imperils pedestrian safety. There are a lot of bikers up here. A lot of people walk their dogs a couple of times a day. And with the amount of traffic that would be increased by 13 new homes, plus construction over a 5 to 7 year period, which is what Frank Dunn said it would be, a 5 to 7 year construction period, we're extremely concerned about pedestrian safety and heightened traffic. We're also worried about the community impact in terms of our rural community. Impact on the character of the community. Most houses are very spread apart. We're deep in the woods. We don't have houses right on the road. And we've gotten to know each other pretty well in this organizing process. But quite honestly, before that, we hadn't even known, most of us hadn't known each other. We're also really worried about the environmental impact with the animals, with the birds, with the water quality. We actually hired a planner, Ted Fink, who submitted a report, which I hope you have, I hope you've read, which goes into quite a bit of detail about the impacts on the neighborhood. And we unfortunately had to hire a lawyer to help us organize in this process. So it's been a real financial burden on the community. And we're very, very concerned that the Olive Planning Board is inclined to issue a negative declaration, even though we've documented and have evidence about a number of this seeker provisions around increased traffic, community character, and the environmental impact. I'll stop there. I could go on, but I don't want to continue. I know you have a lot of material in front of you, but I want to just let you know that there are 150 families who live within a few miles of the proposed development who are losing sleep over this and are extremely upset. So I appreciate you looking into this, and I hope that you'll give it a close look and help the Olive Planning Board at least come to a positive declaration on seeker so that they can do a more in-depth study. That's all we're asking for, is a more in-depth study, not blocking the development, but doing a more in-depth study about the things that we're concerned about. So thank you for letting me speak. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on that project or others?
All right, got it. Next person. Okay, Ms. Frank, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Catherine Frankie. And I also wanted to speak on the Solid Mill development, and we were thrilled to hear that the Ulster Planning Board was going to take a look at it. The development is located within a quarter mile or even less of the town lines of Marbletown and Rochester. It's not just an Olive issue, and the little roads that feed the area where the development is proposed come from Rochester and Marbletown. And for that reason, I think it's really important that the county take a look at this because it has countywide effects. And I know the Olive Planning Board has really been giving it their careful attention. I too share the concern that they may issue a negative declaration when it's obvious that a number of the seeker factors should clearly be, the boxes should be checked for a positive declaration. But I would just implore the Ulster County Planning Board to also take a close look and think about the countywide effects of this proposed development, which is abundantly out of character with the community and will quite clearly have negative effects on the environment and on the reasons why we all live here. As Ms. Goldman said, we have, I think, more than 150 families that have really begged the Olive Planning Board to just slow the process down and do a more careful look for seeker. And we would ask that they work with you, the Ulster County Planning Board, to think about how we develop this community, what that looks like. We've been urging the Olive Planning or the Olive Town Board to take up a comprehensive plan as well, which we don't have. There are at least 3 other large developments that are in the works in our area with people moving up from the city and property value so out of control. The Solid Mill development is just one of many, unfortunately, many proposed developments that will radically change what it's like to live in this community. So thank you for listening, and I do hope you take a close look at what it is that they're proposing to do and work in tandem with the Olive Planning Board for a reasonable and responsible assessment of the impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frankie. Are there any other?
Yeah, I got two. I got at least 2 or 3 more. So
okay.
Ms. Flanagan.
Hi, my name is Angela Flanagan, and I'm the resident of West Hurley. I'd first just like to thank you for this opportunity to speak. So I'm a member of a group called the Town of Hurley Citizens, and in addition to this group, I'm also representing over 200 residents who've signed a letter to the Town of Hurley Planning Board regarding the proposed Cedar East development project. So we've shared this letter with the Town of Hurley Planning Board in order to express our collective concerns, and I'd just like to share that letter with you now, if that's okay. The letter reads, "Dear town officials, the purpose of this letter is to urge you to properly represent and protect the interests of current residents of the West Hurley neighborhood in your ongoing negotiations with the individuals proposing a 46-unit multifamily dwelling at the West Hurley Elementary School. Specifically, we ask the town to deny the special use permit sought by the developers because it violates the criteria for such a permit. Zoning Code Section 210-40C states, before issuing a special use permit, the planning board shall take into consideration the public health, safety, morals, and welfare, and shall assure itself of the following. 1, that there shall not be any detrimental effect by the establishment of such use on other uses within the district. And 2, that such use will be in harmony with the orderly development of the district, and that the location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, fences, and parking areas will not discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent lands. We want to assure you that we recognize the need for diversified, affordable housing in the town of Hurley, and that we believe there are various locations in the town where a 46-unit project would be appropriate. The West Hurley School property is not one of these locations. The proposed development will have a detrimental effect on those quote-unquote other uses, the single-family, semi-rural character of the neighborhood, and the safety of the current residents who rely on its narrow public streets for recreation and as the only ingress to and egress from their homes. While we have expressed our concerns about other issues related to overdevelopment of our neighborhood, water supply and quality, disturbance of the natural environment, etc., our paramount concern is safety. The project's density, combined with its location at the end of a narrow dead-end road with dangerous ingress from and egress to the nearby main highways, imperils pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicle passengers traveling on the narrow streets intersecting with Route 28 to the south and Route 375 to the west. We believe that the existing traffic studies grossly underestimate the problems that will be created by the proposed project. Neither of the traffic studies presented to justify the proposed development have addressed the unprecedented recent increase in population and traffic in our area, nor the fact that peak traffic times in the area occur Friday through Sunday due to tourism. They did not study traffic during peak summer months when large crowds of locals and tourists, all of them traveling on Route 28 and Route 375, attend the Woodstock Playhouse, Maverick Concerts, Birdcliff Theater, Opus 40, the Rail Trail, Bearsville Theater, and the Commercial District of Woodstock. Further, in the past year alone, the population of our county and points north and west has increased considerably due to people relocating north from New York City, a trend that all demographers expect to increase as many companies adopt permanent work from home policies. Not surprisingly, daily traffic has increased notably to those of us who reside near routes 28 and 375. The proposed construction of a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru at the corner of routes 28 and 375 is already a terrifying prospect for those of us who navigate that intersection on a daily basis. In the last several months, over 500 new changes of address in the 12498 zip code alone have been recorded. Migration is putting additional stress on the entire local infrastructure, especially roads and traffic. Any marginal increase in property tax revenue the Cedar East development could bring to the town would quickly be outstripped by the cost to the town's taxpayers generated by the project. In sum, construction of the proposed 46-unit development in a community of predominantly single-family residences would have a detrimental effect on the character of our neighborhood. The proposed project will result in unsafe conditions for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles traversing the local streets intersecting with the two major roadways bearing all traffic into the neighborhood and out of the neighborhood. Further, the proposed location is inconsistent with the town's proposed comprehensive plan update that clearly acknowledges the need and appropriate specifications for parcels that are appropriate for large multifamily dwellings. The deviations from this are so significant that a special use permit or zoning variances are a misuse of those vehicles to approve such a project. We urge you to keep these concerns paramount in your consideration of the developer's request for a special use permit and in the evaluation of their site plans, number of units proposed, size of units, parking capacity, and other concerns that will impact residents of the surrounding area. We're trusting you to do everything legal and possible to mitigate threats and damage to the safety of all concerned by the proposed project. So this letter has currently been signed by about 212 Hurley residents, and that number is growing daily. I'd just like to quickly summarize what's relevant from the county's perspective. While there are a number of concerns addressed in the letter, the most relevant part that we'd like the county to be aware of is the safety concern. The biggest issue for us is putting a development of this size on a dead-end street with very narrow roads. There's no access from the development to a main roadway. So furthermore, our fire department is located right on that block, which presents an additional level of concern about increased traffic and the ability of our safety vehicles to get in and out. And we just want to also take this opportunity to make the county aware of the growing traffic on Route 28, which has increasingly been an issue on its own. There were 2 major accidents on 28 in the last week alone. And a development of this size in this neighborhood would bring exponential traffic onto 28 and onto narrow side streets that are not equipped for it. So we absolutely understand that development is valuable to the community and housing is very much a concern right now. However, we would just like to see a project of this size in a more appropriate location. The Town of Hurley Planning Board has been very helpful in allowing the public hearing to remain open so that everyone can be heard. And the community is speaking loud and clear right now. And we're hoping for a resolution that can be beneficial for everyone, developer, town, and residents. And we believe there is opportunity for much needed development in our town, but we're just asking that it be done in a location that doesn't come at such a high cost to the immediate neighborhood that it's in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Please make sure that is submitted, that letter is submitted to the planning board as well as the town board.
All right, I have 3 more people looking to speak. So,
Okay.
Virginia and Daniel.
Hi, my name's Daniel Kaufman. I'm a resident of West Hurley. I actually live about a half a block from the proposed development, and I really want to emphasize and let your board know how much I support Angela Flanagan and the letter that she read, and how important all of those details are to us that live so close. And I really want to emphasize the water issue. There is already a water shortage in this neighborhood. My well consistently runs dry, even when there's no activity. And there's many other people that have expressed that they also have wells that run dry. So to put a development that size would certainly strain the water service that we already have here. And I also want to emphasize the traffic issue, not only on 28, which is extremely bad as the letter indicates, but even the streets, Cedar and Wall Street, that lead up to the development. All day long, there are vehicles, there are passenger cars, there are delivery vehicles, there are construction vehicles, and most of them are exceeding the speed limit by at least 10 miles an hour. This is consistent. So there are serious issues that we hope that you will take a look at and consider before moving on this project. Okay, and that's all I needed to add. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. You said you had someone else.
I do. 2 more. George Cipher, I believe. I probably just butchered your name, but go ahead.
Hi, my name is George Seafree. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you? Excuse me, I'm presently having some allergy attacks and tremendous coughing, so I'll do my best to try to speak clearly. Yes, my name is George Seafree, and I'm from Seakill Custom Home Builders in New Paltz, New York. I'm one of the owners, one of 3 owners of Sailor Mill Farms. And we are proposing a 13-lot subdivision on 68 acres, which also has 2/3 of a mile of road frontage. Presently, there was a farmhouse there that was abandoned that we knocked down. So we're really only adding an additional 12 homes to 68 acres. Zoning in the area is 1 acre zoning, and our lots average 5 acre zoning. In addition to that, we have put more than half of the property, over 30 acres, in a conservation easement where there is no building allowed. We have done extensive amount of consulting work with many consultants in the area, and every study that we have done has come back with a negative impact. So I just want to say that I find this to be underdevelopment, not overdevelopment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. You said you had someone else?
One more.
Okay, that's it.
All right, you're clear to go ahead. Amonte, I believe is the last name.
Oh, hi, this is Bob Biamonte. I'm a resident of West Hurley, and I just want to start off by thanking the county board members for allocating time to the public. I'm going to follow up again with regards to the seeded development project, and I'm going to take a slightly different approach here. It's first of all, I want to acknowledge that the Town of Hurley Planning Board has done an excellent job in maintaining dialogue with the community, giving everybody the opportunity to express their views. The public hearings remain open, and I am confident it will continue to remain open as long as residents are talking in a constructive, positive way. So this angle that I want to take on this is one of looking for help. I know that the developer, okay, is trying to do something that makes sense. It makes sense for our area in general. And I would like to know, not for you guys to directly answer me for sure, but if we could expand our horizon in working on smart development with developers of this nature. So here, I think there is an opportunity for a win-win. There are very appropriate areas in the county, including Hurley and West Hurley itself, where you don't have a 46-unit development causing ingress into small neighborhoods off of main roads, where a development of this nature would make a lot of sense and would bring value to the community. So I guess what my appeal here is, if there's any help that the county board with their visibility of opportunities and reaching out and working with the Hurley board and working with the developer and creating a win-win situation here, I think that's what smart development is all about. It's not about having people opposing each other. It's more about how do we work together and find equitable solutions for everyone. So for example, just a casual ride on Sawkill Road, there is a wonderful piece of property that's up for sale associated with the old Xena School. It is on a main road. It doesn't require ingress in and out of a small neighborhood. The building was recently occupied by a business, which means there'd be much lower cost for a developer to renovate that versus a building that is in need of significant rework. So I guess what I'm trying to do here is look for people to work together. I know the planning board from Hurley is working on behalf of everyone involved. And if there's an opportunity for members of the county board to help and assist in finding a better location for this, I think we all come out ahead and everyone wins. And I believe that's what we, and those of you in public service, ought to be striving for, creating win-win for all parties. So that would be my appeal. If there's an opportunity there for the county to help the Hurley Town Board in working with the developer. But in summary, this particular development is not appropriate for the current chosen location, but I'm very confident that there are numerous locations where it would work, in fact, would be cost advantageous to the developer in and around Hurley and West Hurley, as well as the broader county, and hence my appeal to the county folks to assist the town folks. And with that, I will conclude and thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biamonte. This concludes the public comment portion. So thank you very much. Robert, would you like to move these up in the agenda?
I don't think so. I think why don't we go through most of the agenda before Hurley's pretty easy. So why don't we get a good amount of material first, and then we can do Hurley and Olive back to back if you want, or
Sure. Let's
move through it regularly.
Go ahead.
All right, let me
Thank
share
you.
my screen.
Okay, we'll start with the SOPUS. Are there any recusals?
Everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great. All right.
No recusals for SOPUS.
Roxanne?
Yes, I recuse.
Thank you.
Trying to get off of mute. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so this is Scrub-a-Dub Car Wash. Site plan on a corner of Route 9W, just so after you come over to Causeway, and you're going to make a right onto Old Route 9W down toward Ward Street Bridge. What they're proposing to do, it's a type 2 action, is expand the existing car wash bays for drying purposes. So I'll bring you to the site plan. So as you can see, you have 4 different bays, and they're going to be extending them. And that's what it looks like. So that's the current back of the site, and towards the trees in the back, that's where they'd be expanding them.
So Rob, can you point that out, Rob? Just we'll go annotate that where it's back in there, right, Rob?
Sure, it's right back in there. So it extend a bit. It's 500 feet. So staff recommends no county impact on this.
So moved, Vince.
Second, Mike Baden.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion passes, no county impact. Thank you. All right, next we'll move to Gardner. Any recusals?
Nope. So, as you may recall, we had a moratorium that was ongoing for kennels for Town of Gardner. Town of Gardner has very quickly crafted a kennels law. Delete and replaces their existing entirety. The focus of the law is more not so much on the nuisance aspect, which was already covered, but on the humane and healthful treatment of the dogs in the kennels and peaceful enjoyment of properties. So you have a lot of the focus, a lot of the standards go towards the care and treatment of the animals. There's no county impact on this.
So moved, Wilkin.
Second, Mike Baden.
So, okay. I mean, I just had some thoughts about it, but if it's not county impact, then.
If you want to make some advisory comments, go right ahead. Or...
Okay. Well, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I think it's really comprehensive, and they're doing a great job of trying to look out for the animals. The fact that the non-commercial 5 to 10 dogs didn't require the same requirements for the housing, I didn't quite understand why that wouldn't still want to have the spaces, the indoor and outdoor spaces that the commercial requirements have. The inspection requirements are kind of mixed between the dog control officer, the code enforcement officer, and then at some point the planning board gets involved as well with violations. We have a mixed up one like that for our wetlands, and it causes all kinds of problems, like the who's doing what and who's in charge. And, you know, it's they might want to think harder about how they lay out that process, and why it would come back to the planning board, actually. So, and then whether the fines can actually be imposed by the municipality or requires going to court and having a judge involved.
This is Wilkin. I just noticed as Amanda was talking, I looked at the points. Is 100-yard setback normal? Because I mean, 100 yards, that's 300 feet. So I didn't know.
That's pretty normal. Yeah.
I didn't know if that was 100 yards, yeah, I can understand if you got dogs barking, but if there was a buffer, well, there's a dog place about a mile or two away from me. In the wintertime, we used to be able to hear them barking, so.
Right. They actually have standards in there for dogs that bark more than a certain amount of time per hour in there as well.
It was just seemed funny that it was 100 yards, or usually things are listed as feet, so.
So, Amanda, what you want to, is there like a regulatory framework that's going to two different boards that you want to make advisory comment on, or?
So as far as the, right, the inspections and the violations, that part?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fact that, I mean, in one part, they talk about the animal control officer doing inspections. And then another part, they talk about code enforcement doing inspections. So one's about, I think, the welfare of the animals, and then the code enforcement's about the facilities. But then at the end, those violations, it thinks, but it doesn't seem very clear, but somehow it comes back to the planning board to decide whether or not to retract the special permit for the kennel. So it's a little bit like, I think they could do a better job of laying out what they expect the inspection and violation and enforcement procedure to look like.
Hey, Vince here. The only thing I was thinking of, the only thing that came to my mind is the county has a local law on the books regarding something to the effect about, leaving your dogs or what have you out in the middle of dangerous elements, shall we say. So maybe like in a little advisory comment back to the town, say, just remind them of that, of the county's local law that's on the books. Something, to incorporate that when they're deciding all this.
So let's just back up. So from an advisory standpoint, and thanks Vince for that comment. From an advisory standpoint, I mean, we have a motion on the floor and a second. We certainly can, with those folks that are made the motions acceptance, add an advisory comment with respect to making sure that the enforcement mechanism is not confusing. And I took a quick look at this. I confess not reading it in detail, but for me, it wasn't. But if others are finding it confusing, that's fine. And the thought being is that exactly as Amanda had put it out there, which is the code basically assigns some duties to the animal control officer, some duties to the code enforcement officer with respect to facilities, and the special permit would come back on the basis, I would presume, of facility violations, not violations with respect to the animal portion of the code or the municipal code. So if the board wishes to do that, we could make those comments that they should be cleared up.
Dennis, this is Glenn. Everything you just said is exactly correct. That's how the duties are divided.
I thought so. I didn't find it confusing, but if others did, then that's fine.
We actually thought that was a clear part of the law.
Okay.
Dennis, can we put something in there, like an advisory about the county's statute?
I really don't want to start adding back at municipal levels, things that the county has by local law. There are certain things I think that make sense. The one you're speaking of, and I'm not familiar with all the provisions of it. I know there's a provision relative to outdoors and in car, but I don't know all the other ones. And clearly, if we're dealing with a kennel, the code enforcement officer on the animal control side would be okay with that. I don't want to add. I don't want to try to have the town enforce two different codes.
Okay. Mr. Wilkin, would you like to amend your motion or not?
Well, is the discussion pretty much wanting them right, where do we stand? Because I mean, right now, I'm a little bit confused after Dennis addressed things. How much do we as a board want to go into this? Maybe we need to do a little more discussion to know if I want, because right at the moment, I don't know, maybe what our concerns are already taken care of, especially after what Glenn said and Dennis said. I'm not sure.
Rob, it's Mike Baden. I can add to that. It sounds like it is laid out exactly as it should be, that the animal control officer handles the health and safety aspects, the code enforcement office handles the building code and the fire code aspects, and that if it's a violation and then only the planning board can remove the special use permit. So it sounds like it's already laid out, going to the appropriate boards in the right path. So
That is correct. That is correct.
Then it sounds like no county impact would be the right move, and I personally would rather not change it then.
Okay. Thank you. All right. With that being said, anyone opposed? All right, motion passes.
You need an abstention, Jer.
Excuse me?
You need to ask for abstentions.
Any abstentions?
Yeah.
No abstentions. Okay. Next one in Gardner is Lumens Holdings. Any recusals? Okay, none. We doing them both together?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
So we reviewed this a few months back. It was for special permit site plan before the planning board. Now it's before the town board. We made comments last time. There's now been a neg deck issued. There are no changes to the proposal. As you may recall, this is just over the border from New Paltz, across from the Ulster County Fairgrounds, next to the Field Dream site, which is the ball fields. 2 megawatt solar facility. So this may ring a bell. Comments are still as the same as last time, pretty much. So with that required modification, we make our stormwater monitoring comment, make sure during construction that stormwater is indeed monitored and that the plans made are followed and that there's no seepage as it goes on as the site is graded and developed. And then
Rob,
go on.
Sorry, I just had a question. You said this is from the town board, this referral?
Yes.
What is the jurisdiction that it's in front of the town board?
I think the town board does special permits, Mike.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize Gardner, that was their
Yeah.
case.
They may be
Thank
just
you.
for certain things, you know.
Understood.
For the large scale solar facilities. So
Motion to support staff, Watkins.
okay.
McCarthy, second.
Vivian.
Okay, Vivian, thank you. All right. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Motion passes with the required mods. Thank you. Let's go to Hurley. The Cedar Development East. You doing these two together?
Correct.
This is Mitchell Cohen. I'll be recusing myself.
Mitchell?
As
Okay.
I'm the chairman of the planning. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
So first off, I'm gonna share my aerial. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so you have the parcel here. So Route 28 is there. Sorry about that. Yeah, there. Move in, and here's our side street here. As we come in, this is the these two buildings here. This and that are the former West Hurley School, which are proposed to be converted to 46 one-bedroom units, condo units. And I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. So we have a neg deck issued on the 4th of January on it. Received quite a bit of information from the applicant on it. SHPO has signed off on it. We've had quite a bit of discussion, you'll see in the yellow, regarding the wells and the well locations. The well studies from the applicant indicated that they now have 2 wells that serve the property and that they have sufficient capacity for the site. Also, with respect to traffic, we've seen traffic study from the engineer for the applicant and from Crane and Manning on it. And so when you look at it, you have, I believe it was 23 trips on the AM peak with respect to this and 30 on the PM peak. And compared to the original school population, it was in the 300 range when it was a school. If I recall. 359 trips in the AM when it was a school and about 71 in the PM when it was a school. Yeah, 23 and 30 trips is what it's projected at. Okay.
So Rob, my understanding was is that the local planning board hired its own engineering consultant as well?
Right, they hired Crane and Manning. And then they had B&L also review Crane and Manning. And they also reviewed the Miller reports from hydrology and concurred with both of them. Let me get to the site plan.
So can you back up, Rob? Just go through, just take a quick look at that's the second page of material that we've gotten, just so you know there's.
Right.
So that's what we received. And then the second page?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that is just lighting specification sheets.
Yeah.
In there that you're seeing there.
So, but there's septic systems in there. There's a number of other things that are in there as well.
Right.
So I think what the board should know is that, you know, from a standpoint of a hard look by the municipal lead agency, there's clearly been a hard look here with respect to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and with respect to their negative declaration.
Robert Dennis, is this it? I see the DEP response. Is this in a DEP? Is it in their coverage area?
I don't think so. I got to remember exactly where I think it's outside.
And I had to do more with I think, yeah. So let me take you to the site plan. This is existing conditions. And that's the change. So you see the apartments are laid out, and essentially what the change is more parking on the site. And there's landscaping. This is an earlier landscaping. The consultants for the town have requested additional landscaping on top of this. They've been through several iterations of the lighting plan. It's all LED, lighting levels are okay. They changed them so that the max is now 5-foot candles, which is what we typically recommend. So minimum max between 1 and 5.
You know what the mounting heights are, Rob? Do you remember the mounting heights? 20 feet?
I don't have that off the top of my head with didn't bring that in.
Okay.
That's just the aerial that I have. And that's a rendering of what the old portion of the school as you enter the site is going to look like. So a couple required modifications. One is, as we have been lately recommending for all multifamily structures, is that they look into electric vehicle charging stations, also look into ways for enhance their sustainability, whether it be through solar, whether it be through geothermal, use of materials. And also the other comment with respect to adequate screening with the adjacencies, make sure the landscaping is okay, make sure the lighting doesn't trespass onto the neighboring properties. You can have the parking arranged so that all parking is lighted onto the interior when anybody leaves, whenever anybody parks on the property. So that's all inward.
So the key in this is the LEDs can be made so that there's only minimal security lighting, and then they can come on for motion detectors.
Right.
So that the site lighting is a lot more in keeping with the neighborhood right now.
Right. Town of Hurley doesn't have a affordable housing statute right now, but given the county's recently adopted, as you've been hearing from us lately, is the housing needs assessment, that the town really needs to start looking at it and making their look into developing their own affordable housing statute for the town. Also look into ways that we could provide additional affordable housing. Well, I don't know about this location, but if they had to set aside that it would be at the
Yeah,
10% level.
it's an inclusionary provision that we think that, the community needs to explore with respect to its multifamily zoning.
Is that the
So-
case with condominiums?
Yeah, you can do home ownership as well. Yeah, it'll work with home ownership as well, Jer.
Just want to make
So if
sure.
I understand this correctly, Watkins, the traffic has a less impact than the school did?
Far less.
And the water probably is the same as the school used?
Same or less. And what the analysis said it easily made the pump test results when they did when you look at the pump test analysis.
So to me, this is a great opportunity to reuse something that they already have. So
Exactly.
I make the motion to support staff.
I'll second it, Mike Baden, but I did have two questions, Rob.
Go ahead.
Is there any provision for a recreation amenity with that many units? Not necessarily a playground or anything like that, but is there any, common gathering area space in there? And then the second is, and this is more a Dennis question, can we provide them maybe some examples or guidance of maybe a percentage of units that should either be affordable or workforce housing?
Sure.
Just based on the county's report?
Right.
Yeah,
We'll be sending them a copy of the housing needs
Yeah.
assessment.
And we can do that. It's more, in this instance, it's more of a reminder that they have an affordable housing issue in the town. And we can provide the data for that with the idea that they should adopt an inclusionary provision with respect to affordable housing. And typically what we've recommended, and this board's recommended in the past, was 10% for 10 units or more.
Right. Well, and that's where I was leading to. I think we can make, even though we can't really do a required modification, I think we can do a strong advisory comment that maybe the planning board of Hurley negotiate with the developer and get them to guarantee a certain percentage will be for, at the very least, workforce housing. But
Yeah, but Mike, isn't that part of the affordable housing under the advisory comments?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
see, what I was thinking of is giving them the information of how to go about it.
Yep.
Instead
I
of
think
just
that's a good
saying you're
idea.
missing one.
No, we
think
will.
That's a great idea.
No,
Great
we
idea.
will. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss the fact that we have an HOA here because of the way the project is proposed to be set up, which is an ownership process. I think it's condominium ownership. There will be a homeowners association here. And so that will require a local approval for that. And that's important. And we just want to make sure that they're aware of that, and they can cover some things, particularly with respect to the long-term upkeep and maintenance of the facility under that HOA, to make sure that the HOA has the power to do that. And that's what the town should pay some attention to that.
We can make an advisory comment about the recreation space. I mean, they are one-bedroom apartments, but there should be some sort of communal space. So we can make it.
Yeah, not necessarily, like I said, playground, but maybe a barbecue area, whatever, something like that. So,
Pavilion.
yeah. So,
Since we heard so much about traffic for pedestrians and bicyclists and stuff, is there any way to suggest that they might want to put in a bike pedestrian lane on the roadway there?
Well, the difficulty is the lack of right of way.
Ah.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, well, I'll stop there. I mean, the project itself, I'm having a difficult time having a conversation about the project itself, but once we get off site, the right of way, there's not a lot of right of way out here. I mean, the neighbors are correct in terms of the narrowness of the roads off site. I think it's a different conversation with respect to whether or not that they're adequate or not for the project. But from the standpoint of providing bike peds facilities, there are no bike ped facilities in the neighborhood at all.
So I have a related question. With all the information you guys got from the developer and the planning board, was there ever any discussion on having an internal road system? That it looks to me like from the property, it has road frontage on Vandale and 375.
Yep.
Was there ever any discussion about having direct access to the property and not use the local roads?
We would actually, from a design standpoint, Drew, we actually prefer to use local roads rather than direct access out to a state highway in this instance.
Okay.
We'd rather basically use the local roads. The idea being is essentially is if traffic builds and it meets warrants, you may be able to essentially establish a signal. The site distances out on Vandale Road are adequate. The only reason I know that is because the county has a bridge facility on Vandale Road, and we took a look at some of the access off of Vandale Road. But the difficulty here is the lane configuration on 28 rather than the site distances. It's speed and lane configuration.
Right. Yeah, 28 is not a good place to do it. I know that.
Yeah, it would not be one for us to the first thing I would say is NISDOT would probably not allow it. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we would actually prefer, particularly for short distances and access. I mean, it would be different if you're talking about, thousands of feet, but for a short distance, access off a local street is preferable, off a side street is preferable than off of the main road. An additional curb cut on the main road is not something that we want to encourage.
Okay, good for me.
How many parking spaces were there?
I'll go back to the site plan real quick. Let's see, where parking spaces was. Let me zoom in on that if I can. There we go. Yeah. 92.
92. And they were projecting, what was their traffic projections?
It was 23 at the AM peak and 30 at the PM. That's at the peak. So.
What were the dates on those traffic studies?
Don't know.
Let's see. I got one from 2019. I have one from 8/19, and then I have, comments from 2020, an additional traffic assessment. Which,
Jerry, I don't think you can equate the parking requirements with respect to traffic demand.
right, the one from 2020 has 23 AM and still corroborates that, those numbers from 2020.
My concerns are that this has been a very strange year and a half. And I think the traffic may be off because of that. That was my main concern.
But Jerry, if you
that
use
was-
the school.
It was
if
a
you-
school.
this is
I agree.
Watkins again.
Mark.
If you use the school, yeah.
I agree with
Okay.
you as far as that goes. I do. I just was just concerned. That's all.
Okay.
All right. I have a motion and I have a second. Does that include the modification for the rec space?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll do that for my second too.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Any abstentions? All right. Those in favor? Opposed, excuse me. Anyone opposed? And I have Mr. Cohen recusing. Okay, motion passes.
All right.
Thank you. Move on to the town of New Paltz, 130 Du Bois Road. Any recusals?
I am.
Yes, Gio's recused.
Geo and Amanda. Okay. Thank you.
So this is a proposal, existing Montessori school. It's a 507 square foot addition to an existing classroom, plus another 143 square foot addition to a bathroom. So only comment with respect to that, and here's the site plan. It's off of Du Bois. It's in the woods. You can't see it from the road. Additions are over in here and in the back over there for the bathroom. Only comment is to verify the adequacy of the septic, given the increase in space and the addition of the bathroom.
So moved, Mike Baden.
Second it, McLaughlin.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, and with those advisory comments?
Those are required mod.
Required mods, okay. Thank you. All right. I have a motion and a second. Any abstentions? Any opposed? And I have Gio and Amanda recused. Motion passes. Next will be 191, still now the Village of New Paltz. Do I have any recusals? None. Okay.
That should read 191 to 193, not 913.
Right.
Just for the record. That'd be a big
Okay.
So 2-lot subdivision, no new construction proposed. Side yard variance of just under 2 feet, front yard variance of 6 feet, and a frontage variance for the width of the driveway. There's no county impact on those variances.
So moved, Vince.
6
Second,
feet or
McCarthy.
16 feet?
Who was the second?
McCarthy.
Thank you,
Gio second that.
I got Mr. McCarthy. Gio, thank you.
The front yard variance is 6 feet or 16?
16 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Any abstentions? And no recusals. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we're in the town of Olive. Any recusals? Okay, none?
All right. This is a proposal to subdivide a 64.3 acre parcel into 13 lots for 13 single family homes. They'll each have individual well and septic, and access would be via Lower Sailor Mill Road. There was an existing house on the property. They demolished it. One thing that are important to note is that this is outside of 500 feet. It's subject to advisory comments only. So we can't issue any required modifications with respect to this. And
Rob, can you back up? Yeah, Rob, go through that, would you please?
sure. And staff should, everybody should know that you probably saw in your folder that we received extensive public comments on this one as well. Okay, so they've looked at species, they've looked at wetlands in great detail, they've looked at stormwater with respect to that, the proposal. They've looked at traffic. They've looked at the well data as well. They've done a phase 1B, and then the town hired CT Mail to do some additional review work. They realized they needed a little bit of extra help to review some of the studies that they got.
Where does it sit on the secret process, Rob?
I don't have a neg deck yet, so I just have, I had a notice of lead agency. I have a EAF. I don't have a full EAF signed and notice of lead agency. That's where I'm at.
They haven't made that decision yet.
Did they have a public hearing on this yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aren't they on a
Public
subdivision?
hearing on the seeker stuff, but not on the project.
But you're supposed to have seeker done before a public hearing on a subdivision.
Yeah, they haven't done that yet.
on a site plan, it can be after this public hearing, but on a subdivision, it's supposed to be before the,
Yeah, I think what Drew said, they had the hearing on the seeker. They didn't have the hearing on the project. They can
Correct.
conduct, they don't have to conduct them concurrently.
okay.
So these are the 13 lots, Lower Sailor Mill Road. You can see to the north and south, that's in conservation. Also, there's substantial wetlands. This is in the Vly area. That's very close to several different towns at this location. So you got Rochester is near it, but in each case, they're outside of 500-foot rule, even though it is close to all those town boundaries. Each lot will individually access Lower Sailor Mill Road. Traffic analysis indicated level service A beforehand and level service A afterwards. So we can
Rob,
only,
did you put up, or can you put up the parcel viewer?
I can. Let me do that.
I'm just curious, when you say it's in the Vly area,
Sure.
there's
Yeah,
some
let me do
very
that.
significant
Yeah, let me do
water
that.
features there that I just want to see proximity.
Absolutely. Let's do that. And that's New Paltz.
Could you by chance just turn on the wetlands? Because I know.
If you're looking at it right now, you can see the Vly without me turning
Exactly. Yeah, I know right where it
I'll turn
is.
it on for everybody just to
Yep.
see it. There you go, right there. And I'll turn on the federal wetlands as well. So that's right overlaying the state wetlands. I don't think there's any floodplains in the area, but I'll check that out too. Nope.
Which parcel is it?
Parcels are here. Let me point them out to you. This one, that.
Okay.
And I'll show you the municipal boundaries just so you can get a sense of where it is. So it's pretty close to Marbletown right there. And you can see it's Rochester on the other side, but neither west side is at 500 feet. And it's not on a county route either. So
Since they're doing a cluster, what are they trying to preserve? It doesn't look like a lot of farm ground there, does it?
no, I mean, they're trying to preserve against the mostly the wetland areas.
So the open space is going to have since it's a cluster development, they're going to have an open space.
That's a straight subdivision.
It's a
Tom.
straight
I don't think
subdivision.
it's
It's not an
it's
open.
There's-
Okay, it's
yeah.
not a cluster.
It's not a
It's a
cluster,
straight-
it's really straight into conservation. so-
Okay, I thought it was a cluster the way.
No, it's a
Thank you.
straight subdivision, and then there's conservation easements on parts of it. Can you just do me a favor, Rob, and just turn
Sure.
on the habitat core areas?
Absolutely. Yeah, that will be interesting to see.
All right, I misunderstood then.
And the habitat core areas, they correspond with the Vly area and they correspond to the northern portion of that parcel. We do have some habitat cores in those areas. So, it definitely is worthy of study with respect to endangered species and habitats, and a real hard look at that.
And they've done that.
Which they've done, but what they've asked to do, and the applicant has already agreed to do this, they're sending their copy of their habitat report directly to the DEC to review to see if there are other species that they may not have included in their look. So they're doing that. And we
Rob,
can make-
did they do a field delineation of the wetlands, or are they just relying on the mapping?
Well, one of the final things is that they need to delineate the wetlands on
Okay.
final wetlands on the final subdivision plat. That is one of our recommendations.
Okay.
Can I move back to the PowerPoint?
Yeah, thank you for putting that up. I knew that wetland was there. I just didn't know exactly where.
No problem. All right. So,
You just go back to the site plan, Rob, so you can go over that again. Sorry,
sure. What do you want to see? Oh, sorry.
just the site plan, just to take a look at it, just to so you give you a sense of what's out there.
Yeah, I mean, you have flagged wetlands on it. You have a wetland buffer on there. 100-foot wetland buffer is noticed on it. It's all in conservation. They do have a SWIP prepared with respect to it.
So where's the 30 acres of conservation easement
To the north.
It's on each individual lot,
on each
Amanda.
one? Okay. So where the dotted lines are, the dashed lines are.
Yes.
Okay. It does
know,
say approximate 100-year flood bounds down there too.
Yeah, there's no detailed mapping out here for flooding.
Let me know when you're ready and I can move on to the.
My guess is that flood bounds is they're dealing with the wetland, because that is a very significant wetland area that changes seasonally. So that's my suspicion, is why what they're calling it flood bounds.
So since each lot has a concept, so does that mean when someone buys a lot, they're going to have a lot that has a conservation easement on part of what they buy, or is that part removed from the, that's part I'm a little confused about.
I believe that's the case, Amanda. I didn't read the easement that closely, but I believe that is the case.
Okay.
Similar to areas, if you plat a map out and you basically plat a non-buildable area on a subdivision, it'd be similar.
So each of those lots has to have that easement monitored?
It would be correct, yes.
That's a burden.
My suspicion is with the conservation easement is that it's going to be written into the deeds, and that each landowner is responsible for the, but it's by deed. It's not going to be an agency taking over the entire conservation easement. It's going to be just by deed for each individual landowner. Like you said, a no build area.
Yep.
All right.
Do they have like an EMC or something like that that monitors it?
Well, the town would have if it's a deed restriction, then typically the town doesn't get involved. But it's on the plat, so they can't pull a permit for it. They couldn't build on it.
My suspicion, Dennis, it's such a small area that they would never find a land conservancy or willing to take it on. So unless the town was going to take on the holding the easement, but so likely they're just going to do it, like you said, through individual deeds.
Okay.
That stormwater ponds there in lot 10 and lot 7, in the back of the lot 10 and 7, is that storm?
Yes, I see. Yeah.
All
There's
right.
a water quality basin in the back of 10 and another one back of 7.
They're not building a road. I just didn't, it's all used in the existing road. I didn't know.
One of the comments we're going to make is they need to establish a stormwater maintenance district for the subdivision.
Or it's assigned to individual lot owners, and the lot owners take the risk. One of the two.
One of the two.
But they need to be aware of that. That's the main thing.
Correct.
The easements to get back to the stormwater pond, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So other advisory comments are obviously health department approvals, they'll need for that, stormwater maintenance, again, sustainable, any opportunities, given that you have about 5 acres per parcel, look into opportunities for solar, for geothermal, building materials, things of that nature that make it a little reduce each of these sites' carbon footprint.
Well, it has to do with the energy code as well, and what they're going to heat and cool the house with. I mean, and these are just basically for the community to consider because they're advisory.
Right.
Rather than use propane out here, there may be an opportunity to use all electric out here.
The other accessory comment we had, advisory comment we had, is that the town is, if they haven't adopted it yet, are in process of putting together their accessory apartments law that they're amending the zoning statute with, which makes it easier for accessory apartments to occur. Even 5-acre parcels that would have the applicant make these parcels as accommodating to those types of uses as well.
That 5 acres includes the non-buildable part.
Yes.
Yes.
If you looked at the lot sizes, Amanda, I think they were between 5 and 10 acres.
Right. But when we were talking about accessory apartments, we were talking about less than acre properties.
Right.
As of right.
It's not the best place for them, but we want to make a comment because the town's in the process of amending its statute with respect to accessory apartments.
Right. Just wanted to let them know that they should accommodate it. That's it.
I only have one comment. This is Mitchell Cohen. It's very common for property owners to put their own, how should I say, dumpings at the back of their property, whether they cut trees down on their property that is usable, or grass clippings and everything else from that yard, the leaves. If they start to pile it up after years and years of collection, the stormwater maintenance agreement won't help because all the other property owners are going to interfere. I don't know what the contours are in the back of those yards, but if there's water flowing from yard to yard, you'll eventually have issues. So dumping is a major concern.
So we think we can make sure that's a great comment. I like that, Michael. We can add that as an advisory comment.
Would it be an enforcement comment then?
No, it's more of, for me, it's more of what's in that conservation easement, and essentially the swales, that they identify those, and that they have issues. If there's anything they can put in those conservation easements with respect to maintaining those swales. I like that. I think that's a really good comment. We can add that, assuming we have a motion. We don't have a motion on the table yet, do we?
I'll make that motion, Mike Baden, with that addition. I think that is a really great comment regarding the conservation easements.
I'll second it, McLaughlin, with that comment.
But that's why I asked about monitoring before.
I got you.
Some sort of monitoring to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen in the easement area.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a monitoring requirement because it is a stormwater system. You know, the question is who, and you can do it by drainage district, or you can do it by the individual landowner has the responsibility with respect to the operation and cleanliness of the stormwater detention facility. That's an option. It's not something that you know.
It doesn't work very well, you know that.
Towns do it, so I mean.
I'm
not arguing with you here. I'm just saying that
right. Our town has the EMC, and it goes out and looks at every conservation easement once a year to make sure that there's been no disturbance.
Yeah, but I mean, if this is a deed restriction, not a concert, you understand that? It's not a. I'm more concerned, frankly, than I am the.
Well, I agree that if somebody's dumping stuff in there, then it's not, but then who's responsible to clean it up? The homeowner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it becomes, when it's in the deed, it becomes a neighbor to neighbor issue that's handled essentially through the courts. And I know it's not a great answer, but if no one agency is holding the total easement, it's done by deed restriction, then that's how it's handled. But it's very unlikely you're going to find an agency willing to take on the burden, if you were, of that small an easement. It's just too small an area.
Well, if you put them all together, it's over 30 acres, he said.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not a big area. I mean, I've got an area of like 60 acres in our town that we are trying to find an agency willing to take it on, and most of them are so overburdened, they're not doing it.
Yeah.
So they're looking in the hundreds of acres or more.
Yeah.
It's the reality of it that it's best handled in those smaller parcels like that through deeds.
So, I mean, one of the things I'm wondering is, since it's unusable land and you're going to put a deed restriction on it, why wouldn't you make the parcel smaller and give that land to the town or something, so the town's responsible for it? And
the town doesn't want it.
the town doesn't want it. Okay.
A and B is it's not necessarily unbuildable.
It's in wetlands, the parts that's in wetlands.
Some of it is, some of it isn't.
Yeah.
The other bigger issue is on those stormwater ponds. They have to be maintained, and at some point they might need to be cleaned out.
Yep.
But they need to be cleaned out and mowed and maintained.
Well, that's the stormwater maintenance agreement. And like
Yeah.
Dennis said, whoever's property is on it essentially knows that when they're buying that property, and they become responsible for it. And,
Right,
and
but there have been other ones I've seen in the town of, or let's say in Orange County, that were not, and they were trying to figure out how they could hold the private owner accountable to clean them up, but they had like 3 or 4 inches trees growing right up in the pond itself. So it can
Well,
be,
the town can hold them accountable.
yeah. But I mean, someone's got to inspect them.
well, but the inspection is through the town, but the maintenance agreement could be shared in all the deeds. And I don't know, it might even be appropriate to recommend a homeowners association to manage that stormwater maintenance, the costs of that stormwater maintenance agreement.
Does it have to be like an easement on those 2 lots to allow that maintenance to occur?
It doesn't. You know,
It depends on who has the authority to do the maintenance on it.
The 2 lot owners would be the ones responsible, but at least then the costs are defrayed across everybody that's contributing to the stormwater retention area. That's where the homeowners association sets up how it's paid for, and then the maintenance of it falls to the owner of the property, either themselves or that they contract out with somebody with that funding.
So we have a I mean, one thing to understand here is we can only make advisory comments. So one of the things that we were going to comment on here was the stormwater maintenance agreement and the need to essentially work that out. And it has to be worked out to the town's satisfaction relative to the approval of the subdivision.
Yeah.
So that's that we can list all of the things that you've basically put out there, but one of the things that they can do is they can make the responsibility of the responsibility of the individual landowner. Doesn't have to be an HOA at all.
This is Drew. There's one thing I wasn't quite clear on. Are those 2 ponds stormwater retention for all 13 lots, or just the ones on that side of the road?
I could bring up the grading plan if you guys want.
Sure looks like it's just that side of the road, the way the contours are running.
Well, that's what I was assuming. So I was wondering what they were doing on the other side of the road.
And actually, one of them is
wetlands on
sharing
the other
between
side.
lot 10 and 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other side is going to run into the wetlands because that's lower.
Oh, okay.
At least that's what it appears.
Then they're going with sheet flow on the other side of the road.
Well, they still have a water quality issue they have to deal with. So
Sheet flow, it's easier to do it with.
I just think the wetlands is a big concern, that's all. So, and the drainage is a big concern. The maintenance is a big concern. So, you know, again, that's something that they really have to look at and really have to figure out.
I'm still a little confused on the seeker issue.
Well, let's just, Jared, if you don't mind, let's just stick and see, where's the board at? Is the board at with respect to the advisory comments? We'll make advisory comments with respect to drainage and how stormwater maintenance is handled over time. Right, and then we
Yes.
health department approvals.
Yeah.
Sustainability and energy efficiency, the wetland boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I had a motion from Baden.
We have
Do I have a
Baden
second?
and Vince right now.
Vince.
So now, Jared, to your question with respect to seeker,
Yes. I'm still confused as to whether or not you mentioned that it's still, well, Tom mentioned that because of it being a subdivision.
They have to complete seeker before they can open the public hearing on the subdivision. It sounds like, based on what Drew said, they held a public hearing on seeker, which is not required, but anybody, it's as Dennis has often called it, it's not really a public hearing, it's a comment session.
It's an
Because-
informative meeting.
Great description, Mark.
So they have not completed an actual seeker for the subdivision.
that's correct. From what we know, that's correct. We certainly don't have any.
They were still collecting information and trying to head towards either a neg deck or a positive deck.
Right, and
They haven't
under
gotten there
under
yet.
the state law, they cannot open a public hearing on the subdivision until they either have a neg deck or they've pos decked it and they're moving towards scoping, and then they can include both the scoping and the public hearing on the subdivision simultaneous. So they either have to have a neg deck or pos deck with scope before they can open the public hearing.
So that's where we are. And that was a little off the resolution. So
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion. We have a second. We have no recusals. Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain, Drew.
Okay, Drew. I'm also going to abstain. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll go to Town of Saugerties. Any recusals? Town of Saugerties. No recusals. Okay.
Town of Saugerties. I believe this is the second time we've seen a changing, we're calling it a changing message sign, also known as a digital messaging sign. So this is their standards with respect to it. To go through real quick, there are going to be where they're allowed, if you put it on a wall sign, it'll be subject to those bulk standards for that part of the zone. Exceptions being the LDR, MDR, HDR, and RH. It can only be on non-residential or public facilities only. They have to be turned off during, a lot of these are very standard things that you'll find in model laws for these types of signs. 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. they're turned off. They're not within a certain amount of feet of the intersection. And then there's distance where you can't have a certain sign within a certain amount of feet of the other. Only one per property. They're only limiting to 60% of the area or less. And then they have a minimum duration for movement. Those transitions have to be as one. They can't fade or scroll out. They can't flash out. They just have to come out. And of course, the messages have to be complete. They can't continue and keep you waiting for the next message. All bad things for driving and being distracted. So just some advisory comments. One is they might want to not allow these in historic districts, as they're not usually in keeping with the context of a historical district. And the Village of Saugerties this is more for the village, actually. If it was in the village, avoid it. But any historic districts within the town, they should avoid that kind of. Also, I've looked at some model statutes. So there's something that's a little bit more contextual with display time, which actually looks at when you see the sign. It basically says the distance divided by the speed limit in a per second way. So it's a way of calculating it based on the distance, so that on each individual sign's basis, you can calculate what the
Rob, is there someone this is Mitchell, I'm sorry. Is there someone that programs it?
Someone that programs it. Yeah, I mean, the individual applicant should program it.
Okay,
And
so
then
what kind of, I'm sorry, there's a little lead lag here. So what kind of, what prohibits political verbiage on that sign?
nothing.
You cannot regulate content. That's basic to sign law. But this is more about the timing. So the sign distance, that's just the context with respect to speed. So you can do it based on each individual sign, and when you see it based on the speed limit in the area. There was nothing with respect to content on these. This was just regulating this type of signage, not all signage in the town. And they have specific regulations as it relates to size. Basically, typically with speech, you can't regulate content. You can only regulate how it's portrayed. So size, time, things of that nature.
Thank you.
Motion, Scott McCarthy, follow staff.
Second, McLaughlin.
Rob, I have seen in some of these statutes, and I know from experience of studying one, Rochester was considering that they can be mandated that if they fail, that they go black, because otherwise, sometimes when they fail, they go totally white, the
That's in there.
entire surface. It's in there? Okay.
That's in there. That's standard. If I don't see that in there, I automatically red flag.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Does DOT have a standard, since they use those message signage up all the time? Do they have standards on what the time frame is on?
No, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because they should know, if anybody, since they use them most.
Right. This is the studies I've read are from like the APA has a whole guidance on, American Planning Association has some guidance on it, and then I've looked at some other models, and they're all pretty consistent with respect to this.
Well, DOT, since they're on for construction and everything else and detours, they got to be at a certain pace. So that might be a good way to find out too.
All right. Right now I have a motion, second. Any abstentions? No recusals. Motion passes with advisory comments.
Jerry, could you just give me the motion and second? I apologize.
The motion was Scott. The second was Vince.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. Schwangunk. Any recusals?
Mark recuses.
Okay.
All right. So this is local law number 1 of 2021. It's just corrections and clarifications. This is a preamble, because we're going to be seeing more from the town of Shonga later this year and as we go along. But this one just went back and deleted some references that don't need to be there anymore, some spelling corrections, some format corrections. They also added a section on allowing the planning board, town board, ZBA to hire consultants and provided an escrow process for them. One comment I'd just like to make is their section on referrals to county is a little bit out of date, just refers to 239M. We'd like to make sure it points to 239M and also the administrative code of Ulster County with respect to outside 500-foot rule advisory referrals.
I'll make a motion.
Second, Victor.
That was Gio that made the motion.
Gotcha, Gio.
It
Made the
says
second.
required mods.
Hmm?
It says required modifications.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought he just said it was advisory.
Did I say so? No, it's a required mod.
It's required. Who was the second? Markowitz?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any abstentions? And Mark, you're recused. Okay, any opposed? Motion passes with required mod. Schwanga moratorium on solar batteries. Any recusals?
Mark recuses.
Thank you.
So, as you said, there's a moratorium on review and development of battery energy storage systems. The moratorium actually uses the NYSERDA system model as a guide. They define it, use those two tiers as their definitions for it. It's a 6-month moratorium. So our only comment on that, especially in the light that the town may be using the NYSERDA model statute, is that 6 months may not be necessary, a 3-month time period, giving need for alternative energies is more apropos. Given that
You want to make this an advisory comment, Rob?
I would like to make this an advisory comment.
All right, let's make this advisory.
Thank you. Originally, I was gonna. Well, I won't go through it. But
Yeah, I
advisory.
would just say that given the process to adopt a local law being a minimum of 2 to 3 months, that anything less than 3 is you got to have it perfect. So
yeah.
Agree.
We'll make an advisory that we think. Well, I mean, the comment could be is that if they adopt it sooner, they should.
Yeah. And well, advisory comments, we do it in 3 months, and we don't want any extensions past 6. That's the advisory comment.
That's good.
Okay.
Then should we also take out the extension clause? Never mind. They had 6 months plus a 6-month extension if they wanted to.
Yeah, that will cover it under the advisory comment.
Thought so.
Quick question,
Okay.
Vince here. Wouldn't they have to have another public hearing if they were to change it from 6 to 3? The town board, since it's a local law?
moratorium is not a local law.
Says local law number 2. Last time I looked, you gotta have a public hearing.
Well, we also don't know if they held the public hearing open, if they already had one. They may have already had one, but Dennis, do you know? I don't believe a moratorium is done as a local law, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
It's an amendment to the zoning statute. It's an amendment to the zoning statute, and I think, Mike, that as such, it has to be a local law, but I'm not sure. I'm not the attorney.
Okay. Yeah.
It's presented to us as a local law. It says local law number 2. And if
Yeah.
there's substantial
Well,
change,
the point being is it's an advisory comment, and they should get, and said that it should be 3 months rather than 6, and it shouldn't be extended. You know, if they have a public hearing and if it's held open, then they should. And to be frank, Vince, it's not our concern. You know, if you have a significant recommendation, then it's the communities that has to deal with the fact that they held a public hearing before they sent it up here and closed it. Yeah. So my sense it's an advisory comment, and that's what we're going to do with it. So
Do I have a motion?
You need a motion?
I need a motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion. Wilkin, I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll
Do I have a
second, Drew.
Drew. Any abstentions?
Yeah.
Mark, you're recused.
I'm a no.
Pardon? Any opposed?
Yes, McLaughlin.
All right. We have 1 opposed, 1 recused. It's passed. Motion passes with advisory comment change to 3 months. Okay, well, Warsing. Any recusals? Go ahead.
All right, so Town of Warsing's updating its zoning statute. So there are a lot of clarifications and corrections and moving a text around because it was fairly disorganized. But the substantive content that is this is 3 main components, and that is a camp overlay district, an adaptive reuse overlay district, and a resort and economic development district, or the red zone, as they're calling it. And that's what we got. This is the zoning map that we got. So things to note in here, and I'm going to highlight the changes. If you see the green hashtag you have here and in there, that's your camp overlay district. Let me explain what the camp overlay district is. So as of right now, if you are not within that, if you are a campground, or actually not a campground, Let me refine that. This is more of a day camp or an overnight camp, so this is a camp, not a for summer camp, seasonal summer camp, not the campground. Campgrounds are handled completely differently. So if you are a existing campground, if you're an existing camp and you're within that overlay district, you're good. If you're outside that district, you're now considered a non-conforming use. Non-conforming ones outside non-conforming use do have the ability to do things via a special permit process. Let's see.
Just so that the thrust of this from the town's perspective is to limit the areas where new campgrounds can be established, and B is to limit the expansion of existing campgrounds outside of that zone, outside of these zones. That's the thrust of what they're trying to do.
Exactly. So if you're existing in there, you can expand in there. If you're new, that's where you have to go.
There's some awkward wording in here, but when you read through it and you have it explained to you, you get an understanding what they're trying to do.
Others, right. Let me go through the other zones we have here. So here, this actually is pink, is the red zone. That is basically, that's Neville Falls View. That's the golf course in there.
Can you zoom in on that, Rob?
Maybe a little bit. This is a static image. I could probably bring up the PDF version of it, but let me see what I can do. Hang on. There we go.
There you go. So the reason for the red zone is you see the VP zone outside of it. That was a visual protection district. And what they found out was that the former Neville Resort was actually in a visual protection district that was really restrictive. And they had established something called a PRRD, which is a planned resort recreational zone on it. But they were having some difficulties with trying to, it was done primarily as part of the rezoning associated with when the Neville was going to become a gambling establishment. They wanted to expand the uses. And so what they did was when they removed the PRRD, right, they realized that they had this underlying visual protection zone that they didn't want. And so now they're going to go back and fix that and add this another zone called an RED, a recreational economic development zone. So that's what they're doing here.
But they're also bringing in a new version of the PRRD, which is the planned recreational resort recreation district.
And that floats.
And that floats in several different areas. The RU zone, forget one other zone, and this zone, the red zone.
Yeah. So you want to go back to the...
Yeah, let me try and get my way out of here. Okay. Okay. Probably better just to take it through my comments, because we have quite a few.
Well, let's go back and talk about the...
Okay.
Let's go back and talk about the three main things, Rob. You had the three main things on it.
Okay, so we talked about the camps. We talked about the red zone. But we'll continue on with the red zone. One thing the red zone doesn't allow is multifamily, any sort of residential development. We think, especially with respect to resort development, resorts need to provide for housing for their employees. So that should be allowed use within the zone, is one thing we're considering. The other, so going on to the AR zone. The AR zone, if you remember, the town of Rochester has an economic overlay district. This is a similar, if not almost identical law, which is basically exactly what it says. It's an adaptive reuse for existing structures as long as they weren't not on a site that's currently in agricultural operation, and they can be used for a variety of uses. And they go through, they can be applied to be added to this AR, this adaptive reuse zone. There's a lot of flexibility with respect to the site plan. And the one thing that was interesting that's different from Rochester version, there's another clause in this that there's a little bit of a mismatch. They say there's residential, that it's for non-residential uses, pre-existing non-residential buildings for non-residential uses. The Town of Rochester version doesn't prohibit residential uses. There's also a limit on the expansion in this one of pre-existing buildings by 25%. We think that both those clauses in there decrease the flexibility of this zone. They probably should be eliminated in order to maximize the flexibility of this overlay district.
You want to go to your comments, Rob?
Sure. So a lot of these things are already in the town code, but since they gave it to us again and edited it, we have a bunch of comments for them. Affordability, there are two things in the town's existing affordability regulations. One is the threshold to require a 10% set aside is either 25. So that's whether it's single family units as in the subdivision or 25 units in the multifamily. We believe that threshold is way too high. We would recommend 10. Also, they use the 100% of area median income, and we've been recommending per the housing needs assessment report of 80%. So we make those both as required modifications. And of course, we'll send them the copy of the housing needs assessment and the pullout that's for the town of Warsing as well. So again, the ARO comments, regulations are inconsistent with the purpose of the district. So eliminating the flexibility of use and the size, and and also there's no specific allowing of uses or prohibited uses. They may want to consider for these districts certain uses that they don't want in those types of use in the adaptive reuse. For example, maybe fuel stations, things of that nature, which may not lend themselves to that kind of use. I think our comments were actually answered about the camp overlay district, correct, Dennis?
That's correct. The camp overlay district was pretty much answered for us, so we don't
Right.
have any comments on that.
Right. Accessory dwellings. These comments are standard comments that the town hasn't proposed any new changes. And actually, I'm going to put these under advisory because we have a whole slew of advisory comments that are probably on the town's slate to make changes of. For example, we know that the town's about to do a short-term rentals law, but there's no short-term rentals regulation in the town, nor is there any sustainability. So we would put our accessory dwelling units about allowing by right, where they're located, not allowing short-term rentals in them, making them affordable, things of this nature as part of the advisory comments, things that the town should be looking at as they go forward to amend their statute. Multifamily dwellings, they have a significant statute on multifamily dwellings. Just want to add a clause that if given that the number of level of detail that they go into as far as a special permit and site plan review process, that they also put a standard that prohibits them from use of short-term rentals. They can leave that for later, but they can get ahead of that now as part of these amendments. Design guidelines versus standards. The town goes back and forth. Sometimes it says design standards, and they'll say, no, we don't want design. Then they'll cross out the word design standards. Then it'll say guidelines. Then 2 pages that low, it'll say guidelines. And then in the appendices, there are standards and guidelines. We suggest that the town pick one and usually recommend standards as a way of getting predictable outcomes. Guidelines can be varied. Standards are a much better way of getting the outcomes you want. UCBB referral process references. This is basically the same comment we made to Town of Shawangum, just making sure all the references are correct. The zoning map comment is just more of a, now we have it, but we need a copy, should be filed, and a copy with the electronic GIS data information should be included and submitted to us for inclusion on the county zoning database. Let's see, what else we got here?
This is the red district, Rob.
Red district. So, and you may have more to say on this, Dennis, but okay, as we mentioned, there should be some allowance of housing in the red district, particularly as it relates to development resorts.
So here's what we're thinking. We're thinking that resort facilities bring with them a challenge with respect to workforce housing. And the PRRD, which was the predecessor of the red district, allowed for housing. The red district doesn't. And there's been some discussion that they want to provide housing elsewhere in the community. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but there's no way for essentially the developer of the project avoids the housing consequences of his development. So what we want to do is add housing as an accessory use within the red zone, and make the comment that the community needs to understand that resort operations bring with them a need for a large workforce that basically cannot afford the housing that's in the community right now, and they need to provide some means to essentially address that housing situation. So that's what this comment's about.
Dennis?
Yes.
In that red zone there was some discussion before about having workforce housing somewhere. They have a property on the 209 side, and they had in another area, maybe about a mile and a half away, for workforce housing and such, Dennis.
I get it, but the red zone, our sense is that
that's
the red
within
zone.
The red zone, Dennis. They had it previously in the previous, when they had the other hotels there. They had some form of workforce housing there.
Right, but the current red zone the red zone does not allow it. Is the point we're making?
Yeah, the housing's not permitted in the zone, and the only point we're making, Victor, is that it should be in some shape or form.
Well, I agree with that, Dennis.
Okay.
Why don't you make that an advisory comment?
Well, we think it's important enough that it should be a required modification.
Well, when you're talking about housing now, there was some talk about building some homes there in that red zone. On the resort side. And there was some homes there originally. There's still some homes there on that property, believe it or not. Excuse me, Dennis.
Well, I think you're agreeing. I think you're agreeing with the comment. That's what I'm taking away from your discussion, Victor, is that they should allow housing in the red zone.
Well, what you're saying is that what you're saying is you don't want housing in the red zone. Is that what you're saying at all?
No, just the opposite. Just the opposite. The current proposal would not allow housing as a permitted use in the red zone. And we're suggesting that it should be added as a permitted use.
All right, I agree with that. That sounds amenable.
Okay.
Dennis, did you have specific comments on the agri-hood?
Rob,
sorry.
Just to clarify, Rob, which on the required list, you said you were moving some to advisory. That was the
right. I'm moving the accessory dwelling comments to advisory.
Okay, and what about the multifamily dwellings? That too, or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Is that in your comments, Rob? The agri-hood?
It is in the comments, but I don't know that we had any more comments. It was just there may be a remnant from our discussion.
So if anybody does not know what an agri-hood is, I would urge you to look it up. It is
an agri what?
Agri-hood, AGRIHOOD, agri-hood.
Okay.
It's now an acceptable term for essentially a mixed-use residential conservation subdivision that is designed to essentially accommodate agricultural uses of various kinds.
Well, Dennis, What acreage would be involved in an agri-hood?
It doesn't have a minimum acreage or a maximum acreage from what we can say. It's tied to a cluster subdivision or a conservation subdivision in this statute. That's how it's done.
Dennis, was that something that you added in?
No, that's something that it's in the proposed changes to the statute.
Oh, it is? I didn't really read that part.
So,
all right.
It's
that. I'll talk to the supervisor tomorrow about that.
It's some technical comments with respect to this, but it's an interesting comment, and we want to call it out. And we're going to call it out as an advisory comment that we support the idea of essentially allowing agricultural uses to take place within conservation subdivisions, and using the land that is available for that's good for agriculture, for actually, rather than use it for open space, to actually for productive agriculture. This goes one step further, and it allows things such as farm stands, wineries, other
farm to table restaurants,
rather than just agricultural lands that are in production.
Right. I think the cautionary comment we wanted to make was about special events.
Yeah, that was the key in my mind. Is that one of the things we were concerned about? Is that these types of things could get out of hand in some of the conservation subdivisions, and they want to make sure that doesn't occur. That's the main comment. But we really like the concept here.
I think you got too many.
I'm not a fan of the name, but that's beside the point.
Dennis, I think you got too many armchair weekend wannabe farmers.
That could be true.
The last required modification has to deal with seeker. We got a full AF, but it was basically unfilled out. So, and this is a townwide zoning code update, which is essentially probably a type 1 action. So they're going to need to complete their seeker work with respect to this.
Motion to support, staff.
Second it, McLaughlin.
So I had a first, Mark.
Mike Bano thirded since they copied the EO that I wrote.
Very brilliant.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Any abstentions? Okay, and no recusals. Any opposed? Motion passes with staff recommendations, including the agri-hood.
Sounds like a rap music song.
It's quite interesting. Look it up.
I will.
If you type it in, it'll come right up on your Google search for some model language for it.
Dennis, it sounds like a rap music song or something.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move it.
Okay. Let's do this again next month, maybe in person.
Then I got to drive.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Yep.
Good night, Rob.
Good night.
Good night.